So, Jenny, are there any questions?
Yes, it was silent for a long time. I think we were all so inspired by what you told us.
Hopefully.
But there is one question. It's a question: where or why did we lose our nucleus in the religions? And why are there so many different approaches?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, in Theosophy, we speak of the path that we, as human beings, or as every being, go through. We will talk about it a bit more in the next portion of the section. So what you can say about human beings, that somewhere on the path, we got a bit caught up in the material atmospheres of life. So the path that we are going through, as you might say, is from relative unconsciousness to relative being a conscious, full-blown, almost divine, or you can say divine human being. And somewhere on the path, which goes like this, not really, we're not going downwards, but we're going from the more spiritual realms through the more material realms or material spheres, so that we can learn our lessons and work our way up. Now, this could be a quite harmonious path, but what it is said, or what teachings are telling us to reconsider, or to consider, sorry, is that somewhere along the lines of that path, we kind of lost our way. So when we are pulled, when our souls are pulled by the more material aspects of life, it is said that we kind of got confused and caught up with that. And we got so confused that we started focusing way too much than is needed on the more material things of life. And that's where the disconnect started. So now if you look at our society now, you can say that we still are living in a large part, for a large part, in that disconnect. And the ancient wisdoms or universal wisdoms or theosophy or however you may call them are all designed to make us remember the path and make us remember our own immortal part of the soul that is really not touched by what is happening in these more material spheres. We are not here to stay. We are here to, we are passers-by in this atmosphere. So anyway, that is where the disconnect started. And then you have these impulses from the masters of wisdom and compassion, and each one gives their impulse in a specific time frame, in maybe a specific culture. So what we see is that the universal message is then being modified slightly so that people in that time frame and that culture can understand. And then we, fragmented as we are inside of us, then we look at it and we see all different messages. But if we zoom out and we reconnect with our inner spiritual being, then we might see and learn that it's just one message.
Thank you. Nice. There are no further questions.
Thank you. Well, let's pick it up again with that ancient or universal wisdom, the universal religion. For there is one message that is constantly being repeated and being sent to us so we can wake up again. And in these messages, there are three central tenets or propositions that we should definitely discuss. And you could think of them as hypotheses, which you can think about and see for yourself whether they could explain life. And we need them to be able to understand other teachings and put them into context. And we need them also to lift us above the issues of everyday life, the issues that we face in times of crisis. Now, the first proposition is boundlessness. And this is also presented as the deepest essence of any being. In all religious traditions, it is mentioned, although any reflection upon it is of course deficient. Because how do you grasp, how do you understand the infinite? That is not possible. Therefore, it is referred to by using terms such as emptiness or sunyata in Buddhism, or para-Brahman, beyond Brahman in Hinduism, or Tao or Tat, simply that. Everything we can see and all we cannot see is part of it. And we are, all life is the boundless. In our next step, we can see that infinity expresses itself in waves of infinite crowds of beings. So the ancient Greeks also call this the fullness or pleroma. And everything we can see and all we cannot see is part of that. So there is the emptiness and there is fullness. And that is the paradox that we are, which is every being. You are limitless and you are the limitation. A piece of defined consciousness, if you will. Now that limitation is of course illusory. And this illusion of limitation is also called Maya in Hindu philosophy. And we have our existence in what you might call illusion. Not in the sense that it does not exist, but in the sense that it is ever changeable, growing, always in motion. Panta rei, the ancient Greeks said, everything is in motion, in development. Motion is the only constant. So the illusion of manifestation serves to gain experiences, to learn, to grow, to discover more and more of that limitlessness. It serves to be able to be, because only in that illusion you can, as a being, have the experience of being. And it is only in that illusion that you can have the experience of being together, which inspires feelings and ideals and experiences of love, connection, of compassion from the depths of our being. It is truly, in fact, a wonderful game. Now, boundlessness flows, as it were, into oneness, or the one. So it is the mind, the energy, active power side of life. And as it does, it is immediately accompanied by what we call a veil, or the soul, matter, or the matter side of life. So you have the energy side of life, and you have the matter side of life. Again, there's this paradox. But of course, in the beginning, we talk about abstractions that are unimaginable to us. Abstractions from which slowly, layer by layer, all life is built and formed. The yin and the yang. Boundlessness, completely illusory, is slowly but surely expressed in those two poles. So nothing can be destroyed or created. Mind as well as matter are indestructible, eternal. So in Christian Gnostics, the mystical movement in Christianity, those two poles or seeming opposites, the paradox, are also presented as the father and the mother. And this is why Jesus said that he and the Father, the One, are one. We live and have our being in the One. The Father, as he called it. A Hindu would call it Brahman. And from that heavenly Father and Mother, the child is born. And we can look at that in several ways. So there is the cosmic child, Brahma, from which the universe originated. So who, being the child of that cosmic Father and Mother powers, then gives birth to the universe in which all beings may have their existence. Brahma, or the demiurge, in Christian Gnosticism, is also called the world builder or the world creator. He, as a kind of source being, produces the universe from within his own being. It flows out from the depth of his heart with waves and waves of beings. Solar beings, planetary beings, humans, animals, plants bring themselves into being, as it were, through its force of cosmic consciousness. So our universe is completely filled with gods and monads and souls and atoms. Pleroma, fullness. There is emptiness and there is fullness. And both are true at the same time. Everything is in essence boundlessness. And together they form all beings, great and small, and these are relative concepts, of course. We are a unity of life, diverse in our individual expression, so we are unity in diversity. We are the flame at the core, and we express ourselves in spectra of color and sound. And that's how we play the game of life. We play with force and with substance, and everything changes continuously in composition and characteristics. Another way to look at the cosmic story of the Father, Mother, and the child is that we ourselves are, of course, that child. And because nature always repeats itself and copies itself, from the most spiritual to the most material, we also see here on earth a father and a mother who together bring forth the child. And at the heart of our hearts, we are the cosmic child. We are the earth child, and we are the cosmic child. Both are true at the same time. Originating from the great yin and yang, spirit and matter, we all have the powers within us, and we are built from them. We are born to parents who guide us into the world, or perhaps we ourselves as parents guide children, but our true parents are the cosmic Father and Mother from which everything originated, which are all the same for all of us. The second proposition assumes that all life, which expresses itself as an illusory, limited part, a piece of the boundless, you might say, does that actively and passively. And there we also see the effect of yin and yang, active and passive, walking or waking and sleeping, flood and ebb, light and dark, and also life and death. The coming and going of universes is also called the breathing in and out of Brahma, the world builder. So with each inhalation, life withdraws to the inner planes of consciousness for a rest or period of sleep. And with every exhalation, we are active, learning, discovering, expanding our inner powers of intelligence and love. We are talking about time periods that are, of course, beyond our comprehension. In the exhalation, we are experiencing, learning, and developing, just as we experience it in our own lives, as above, so below. And here we see the idea or proposition of cyclicality. All life moves cyclically in a cadence, in a cosmic rhythm of activity and passivity. And this is also where the idea of re-embodiment or reincarnation comes from. Time also arises in manifestation, because with beings who are born, live, experience, discover, grow, and then die again, so withdrawing to the inner planes, suddenly the experience of past, present, and future arises. While on the level of the One, which is our deepest self, only what we call the eternal now exists. Both are simultaneously true. The third proposition indicates that every being arises from boundlessness and therefore also carries boundless possibilities within itself. So all life, therefore, is absolutely equal, from the greatest deity to the smallest atom. In principle, both carry the same possibilities. One has only developed them more than the other, with respect to each other, of course, because more or less developed in the light of infinity is, of course, relative and in itself meaningless. We need our experiences in manifestation, in form, in the limitation of our outer worlds, in order to develop from unconscious divine spark to a conscious deity. Like a baby goes from relative unconsciousness to an adult and a conscious human. So above, so below. So every person is engaged in that voyage of discovery, which we also call a pilgrimage. Every human being finds himself on the path, consciously aware or unaware. And that path itself is, of course, also infinite. Now you may be wondering why all this is happening. This is an understandable and frequently asked question. What is the point of all this? Well, you could say that the illusion or manifestation exists in order for experience to take place. You need the yin and yang for that. You need duality. You can only experience what light is if you also know the opposite. So creating duality creates the experience and the possibility of infinite growth. And what is the point of all this growth? Or the experience itself, perhaps, being per se? Madame Blavatsky, the co-founder of the Theosophical Society, writes in her book, The Secret Doctrine, that we don't know the answer to the big question of why. And perhaps that is because any answer expressed in words could never convey the essence. Maybe we need to learn to experience, to feel what the meaning is, because it is simply beyond our understanding. Now, what I do like in this context is that in Hinduism, it is stated that Brahma brought about the universe as a joke. because he was bored and it seemed like fun. And Gottfried de Perrucker writes about these stories that this idea that the universe is actually a game contains much sound, scientific, and philosophical truth. He says, the bringing forth of all things was not a tragedy. There was beauty in it. There was harmony. There was humor in it. Humor is a divine quality. And those in the universe can, if they wish, see the humor in it. We could learn to laugh at ourselves and our crazy little attachments. Now he continues, how much conflict and other suffering would have been avoided if people had a sense of humor. If one saw the funny side of things, one would begin to get along better with one another, love one another, laugh with one another, and consult one another rather than distrust one another. Now, Lao Tzu, here he is seen in the picture. Lao Tzu also refers to this when he says, if you want to overcome your lower self, that is the tendencies that are less noble, laugh at them. Don't fight it, because then you will only make it more important. You certainly shouldn't want to kill it. Our lower self, also called the personality, or in popular spiritual books, often called the ego, belongs to us. So we could keep it in check, like kind of a friendly animal. If you're going to hit it, and if you're going to hit an out of control animal, it just makes it worse. You're taking it down the wrong path. Therefore, the lower self should never be beaten, as it were, nor be humiliated. It is not equal to your true self, your wiser and more compassionate self. So do not grant it that status and power either. Treat and guide yourself with kindness, gentleness, with compassion. Laugh at what's bothering you. The role that humor plays in our life is all too often overlooked. The ability to see humor in what happens to us and what we all make up in our mind about it is a spiritual quality. As GDP puts it, humor is the foundation of the universe. And I believe it is one of the greatest tragedies of individual existence to lack the ability to see the funny side of life. Now, this story so far shows that there is something fundamental underlying the universe. And that is what we can call selfless love or compassion. And there's another lesson from the wise. For in any religion or grand philosophical system, love and compassion are at its core. And in the book, The Voice of the Silence, it is beautifully expressed as follows. Compassion is not an attribute. It is the law of laws, eternal harmony, Alaya's self, a shoreless, universal essence, the light of everlasting right and fitness of all things, the law of love, eternal. And the more you become one with it, your being melted in its being, the more your soul unites with that which is, the more you will become compassion absolute. Since all life is essentially one life, selfless love is the law of laws. Diversity is a beautiful illusion because you and all the rest of life are one. So the feeling of separateness is therefore also referred to as the only sin or heresy. Not in the sense that there is an authority outside of you that is punishing you for that, but in the sense that it is truly the source of all suffering. The illusory feeling that we are alone, cut off from the rest and completely absorbed in what we could call our little self, our personality, at the mercy of the whims of life. And that while we are being told that we are all children of the universe, of the physical side of it and of the spiritual and divine side of it. That is why there is an imperishable source in the heart of every human being, not only of inspiration, but of growth, hope, wisdom, and love. Yet we don't always feel it that way, or maybe even most of the time. And in times of crisis, that feeling may seem even further away. We talk about that some more later. First, the lessons we have discussed. Boundlessness. All life is boundless. From the boundlessness, the duality arises, the father, the mother, in which we have our experience. Cyclicity. All life moves cyclically in a cadence, in a cosmic rhythm of activity and passivity. This is also where the idea of re-embodiment or reincarnation comes from. The third fundamental proposition indicates that every being arises from boundlessness and therefore also carries boundless possibilities within itself. All life, therefore, is absolutely equal, from the greatest deity to the smallest atom. Humor is the foundation of the universe, or an aspect of the foundation of the universe, because compassion is not an attribute, it is the law of laws. And you might say that compassion or selfless love is actually the foundation of our universe, of our life, and of ourselves. We now take another 3-minute break in which you can ask your questions or share your thoughts via email or chat. See you in 3 minutes. So, Jenny, are there any questions?
Yes, there are some questions. 2 questions. They are a bit similar, so
Okay.
I put them together. Somebody who was very impressed with the story of the candle, which is so beautiful, what you told about in the first part. And she asked, why are these stories always told in symbols? And the other question is that Lao Tzu used also a lot of paradoxes. And can you say something about what that means? I think they are similar.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I love the story about the candle. It is so powerful. That's why I really wanted to use it. And why is it always being told by using symbolism? I think what the masters are trying to do, they're trying to create a message that is most likely to be understood by us. So I think they modify their message to, you might say, our level. I think that's why a lot of symbolism is being used. And also previously, so before Madame Blavatsky and her friends came to bring Theosophy, there was a lot of symbolism used, because if you know the teachings in their purest form, you can perhaps also use it for, not for the good of everyone, but you can also kind of misuse it. So that's why a lot of the teachings in earlier periods of time are being brought using symbolism. So I think that's one part. So now with Theosophy, which is not new, of course not. There's only one message. It's just another way of bringing the teachings to us. But I think in this time and age, we were perhaps more susceptible for teachings in their purest technical form. So without a lot of symbolism, but they're just being brought to us. So that's why we love to examine the teachings of Theosophy. So they are not different, but they are perhaps more clear, if you will. So I think that's part of the whole symbolism story. Now, the paradoxes, those are very interesting because we are a paradox. So, and that's one thing that we can hopefully start connecting with. We are not one thing, we are many things. And at the core, we are the paradox of boundlessness and a limitation, a limited being. And that's a very good practice to be able to connect with that. So can you meditate when you get up in the morning? Can you meditate on that? I am boundlessness and I am a limited being which is growing into the boundlessness ever more. And that is very inspirational to meditate on. And I think wisdom, especially in the form of mysticism, where next month the lecture is about mysticism, is designed to wake us up, to stimulate our intuition. And I think that's why a lot of also the symbolism, but also the paradoxes are being used, because we are a paradox, and life is a paradox. So it is an invitation for us to take those in and meditate on them and make them kind of alive and awake in ourselves, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. There's another question, somebody who says, can you say that matter is also cooperating with consciousness? And how can I see then things like a car or a closet, how do they grow?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So that might be a little difficult for us to imagine, living in the era that we are living in, which is kind of predominantly guided by a more material outlook on life. So what we say is all life is boundless. So that means that whatever I can lay my eyes on is life. So to us, the smallest atom is life itself. So these little beings are what make up the chairs or the walls or a car, what have you. So yeah, matter, or that part of the realm, so you always have a spiritual part and you have a matter part, and they always cooperate to create the experience of life. So you need it. It's like the father and the mother and the duality of life. So the matter side of life helps us to evolve, to have our experiences. So without these matter, the matter side of life, these small beings that we work with, we would not be able to have our experiences. So, but the opposite is also true. Because they are working with us as conscious human beings, they are also being able to develop and learn on their own, for us, very limited way, but they're also moving and growing and developing. Now, us as humans, we have a very special responsibility in this whole setting, which we can call Earth, and which contains all these beings, because our way of thinking and being and doing, if we are in harmony with life itself, if you will, with totality, then these small beings are also being brought into that harmony. And they will learn faster. This not only goes obviously for small atoms, but think of, for instance, animals or the plant world. We have a big responsibility to bring ourselves in alignment with harmony, with cosmic harmony, so we can create an atmosphere in which all those beings can learn and develop. So in the end, we are all here to learn and develop, even the smallest beings.
Okay, thank you.
Yes?
No further questions. Yeah.
Good, good. Well, then we go on with the third part of our lecture.